If sponge cake and fruit or black cake made love, the cake we're going to make today would be their baby. Today I'm going to show you all how to marry two Trinbagonian classics. Alright, so the first step is to prepare our fruits. Now of course, if your granny or your tanty has to have fruit soaking whole year round, feel free to go ahead and use that. But I'm going to show you how to prepare it from scratch if you don't. So what I'm going to do is just chop it up, just give it a rough chop. I mean, ideally you want it in even pieces. I'm just going to give it a rough chop just to break them down before I infuse them with my cinnamon stick and the cherry brandy and white rum. And of course, if you all are interested in shopping any of the utensils and knives we use here in these recipes, feel free to click on the bio of all of our social platforms. Alright, so to our small saucepan here, we're just going to add in our cherry brandy, white rum, and cinnamon stick. Right, and once it's boiling up like that, I'm just going to bring the heat down to low and add in our fruits. Our fruits are going to absorb the flavors of the rum. Let it sit for a little while before we break it down. Right, so while our fruit mixture is steeping, we're going to go ahead and make the browning. And two simple ingredients. We're just basically going to caramelize the brown sugar just like if you was making stew. Just mix, and you could use your fork or your spoon to just feel for the sugar granules, because once they're fully dissolved, you could go ahead and add your hot water to it. So you can see how it's starting to foam up as I was talking about earlier. So I'm just going to go ahead and add my water, mix. And it's important to add hot water, because if you add cold water, the change in temperature will just recrystallize the sugar and stop the cooking process. It will then have to heat up and then melt again and then continue. So this is finished, as you can see, browning. Alright, so if I could just come in here, you can see I went ahead and I added the fruits to our browning mixture. So what I'm going to do now, I want to break the fruits down even further and also use the opportunity to evenly incorporate it into the browning and allow everything to marry together. So I have the NutriBullet here. I'm just going to transfer this to the NutriBullet and process it down to a much finer and even consistency. Alright, so it's almost like a thick paste. Of course, if you was making traditional black cake, then sure, you might want different consistencies. You might want this, you might want it a little chunkier, and then you might want some actual whole pieces. Because you know, some people like to see whole fruits and whole cherries in their black cake, but because this is a sponge cake and black cake combo, one, we don't want to overpower it with the flavor of the fruits and the rum, and then two, we don't want to negatively impact the overall end product by it being too dense or some of the thicker fruits or larger chunks of the fruits sink into the bottom of the cake. Alright, so before we actually start to mix the cake, I just want to run through some simple ways to make the process a lot easier. Starting with pre-portioning all of your ingredients and getting them on the same temperature. So all my ingredients have been pre-portioned and they're all at room temperature. So they are able to mix a lot more evenly and incorporate into one another a lot more evenly. So the first thing I'm going to do is start by adding in my butter. I'm just going to give that a light whip before I add in the granulated sugar. Right, so you see the benefits of having your butter at room temperature. I basically didn't even have to whip it. So I'm going to add in my granulated sugar now. And I'm going to start at low speed, just so that the sugar doesn't go flying all over the place. And here as you can see, as it is more or less incorporated into the butter, I could slowly but surely increase the speed. Now what you're trying to achieve here is you want the butter to help dissolve the sugar granules. And by whipping it, you're also using this opportunity to incorporate, to whip air into the butter, making the butter and the end product a lot more lighter. Right, so here you can see the butter has more or less latched onto all of your sugar granules. The sugar is starting to dissolve. So at this point, what I'm going to do is start mixing my eggs. But before I mix in my eggs, I'll use the opportunity just to make life a little easier. I'm going to add my vanilla extract to the egg and mix together the eggs. Well, I'm going to beat the eggs and mix in the vanilla extract. This too also helps speed up the overall mixing process. All right, and I'm not going to add all at once. I'm going to add in about like half. And then I'm going to beat at low speed to prevent any mess, any spillage. And once it's more or less incorporated, I could gradually increase my speed to about medium. All right, let me add in the balance of my egg mixture now. Alright, but before I start to add in my Ibis Premium flour, I'm gonna go ahead and mix together all my dry ingredients. So I'm adding salt, I'm adding Lion Brand baking powder, baking soda, freshly grated nutmeg, and freshly grated Tonka Bean. Doing this before adding it to your butter mixture just helps to evenly incorporate all the dry ingredients within the flour, helping to give you a much better end product. Right, so we're gonna alternate between our dry ingredients and our milk. And you could divide this into like 3 or 4 parts. Low speed until it's incorporated. All right, and then I'm gonna add in some of my wet. Some more dry. Some more wet. Add in the rest of my dry ingredients. Add in the balance of my evaporated milk. Now before I add in my lemon juice and fruit mixture, I'm just going to scrape down the sides of the bowl just to help you get an even mixture. I'm just using my attachment here to clean my spatula. Adding in my lemon juice. The mild acidity helps to balance out the sweetness of the sugar, richness of the butter, earthy flavors of the nutmeg, the Tonka Bean. Just give it one last one over high speed. All right, and the last thing I'm gonna do, add in my fruit mixture. Now you don't want to over mix this, you just want to mix it enough to incorporate. You see the browning is changing the color, the overall color of the cake, giving it a much darker color. Right, so that's a quick whip over high speed here, and that's it. And we're going to transfer to our greased and floured 9-inch round baking pan. Flouring the pan after greasing just helps reassure no sticking. Alright, so I'm just going to level it off here and just knock any air bubbles. And then he's going to go in the oven set at 325 degrees for anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, so time to check our sponge cake and black cake combo. So it's at its halfway point here. So what I want to do now is turn. As you can see, the front of it, which was to the front of the oven, has more color than the back. So I'm just going to rotate and push it back in and continue to let it bake. Right, so as you can see, The cake is already pulling away from the side of the pan, which is one clear indication that it is more or less cooked. You can just touch the metal, and once it springs back up, you know the center is fully cooked. And then lastly, just take a knife or a ice pick and stab through the center. Once it comes out clean, you know your cake is cooked. Right, so after you let your cake cool in your pan for about 10 to 15 minutes, now it's safe to remove. So I'm just using a butter knife, or you could use an offset spatula, and just ensure the sides of the cake are off of the pan. Right, so what I'm gonna do now, I'm just gonna use my left hand, place it on the pan, just knock the cake to free it from the pan. Here you go. And then place it on your plate. Now I'm gonna leave this to cool on the counter until fully cool, and once fully cool, we'll slice. So now our sponge and black cake or fruit cake mix is fully cooled. Now it's time to slice. So let's go. Wow, so as you can see, the fruits did not, thankfully, sink to the bottom. They are evenly distributed throughout the cake. You're getting that classic fruit cake smell with sponge cake texture and moisture retention. There you go, people. Perfect marriage.